Hello, my dear Muslim brothers and sisters across the globe. In a peaceful village cradled by rolling green hills and the sound of birds singing at dawn, there lived a boy named Hamza. Though only 12 years old, Hamza possessed a wisdom that was far beyond his age. He was the son of a humble fruit merchant, spending his days at the bustling market, helping his father with crates of fresh, colorful fruit and serving customers with a kind smile. His life seemed simple, yet there was something extraordinary about him. Hamza had an unshakable love for knowledge. Every morning, long before the sun began to rise, he would quietly slip out of bed and run to the small mosque at the edge of the village. There he would meet Imam Z, a wise and gentle man who taught him the Quran. But Hamza's thirst for understanding went beyond just memorizing the verses. He wanted to know their meanings, to uncover the deeper truths hidden within each word. His questions, full of curiosity and insight, often left Imam Z in awe. One morning, as Hamza sat beside him, Imam Z placed a hand on his shoulder and said with a smile, "Hamza, you are a special child. Your understanding of the Quran is deeper than you realize. Keep learning, for knowledge is the light that will guide your life." Hamza's face flushed with modesty. He didn't feel special. He simply saw learning as an act of worship, a way to draw closer to Allah. It was a silent devotion, a way of showing gratitude for the wisdom he had blessed him with. But not everyone in the village shared Hamza's views. On the other side of the town stood a large church, its steeple reaching high into the sky, led by Pastor William, a preacher from the city. Known for his fiery, passionate sermons, Pastor William stirred his congregation with powerful words, though his speeches often carried harsh criticisms of other religions, including Islam. When news spread that Pastor William would be visiting the village to give a special lecture, the whole town buzzed with excitement. Crowds gathered at the church, eager to hear his words. But there were whispers among the Muslims, concerned that Pastor William's purpose wasn't just to preach, but to mock their faith. "He will be giving a big lecture this week," said one merchant in the market, speaking quietly to Hamza's father. "They say he likes to challenge Muslims and make them prove the truth of their religion. We must be careful." Hamza's father nodded thoughtfully. "Let him speak as he pleases. The truth doesn't need to be defended through arguments. Hamza, come help me with these apples." Hamza listened closely, a mix of curiosity and concern growing in his heart. He wondered what this preacher would say and what his own role in this might be. Little did he know, the events that were about to unfold would tie his fate to Pastor Williams in an unexpected way. That night, after the Isha prayer, Hamza found himself sitting alone in the quiet mosque yard, surrounded by the soft glow of the moon and the endless twinkle of stars above. He whispered a prayer, his voice barely audible. "O Allah, if I am given the chance, grant me the strength to defend your truth, even though I am but a young child." Hamza's prayer soared to the heavens, a heartfelt plea from a boy on the brink of an extraordinary journey. The quiet streets of his small town held no clue about the greatness stirring within him. Yet, deep in Hamza's heart, he felt that his moment was near, a chance to prove the power of faith and courage against the odds. The day finally came. The city's grand church stood illuminated in the sunlight, its tall spire casting a shadow over the bustling crowd that filled its halls. Inside, every seat was taken, and the air was thick with anticipation. People weren't just there for Pastor William's sermon. They had come to witness something more, a spectacle where the pastor vowed to disprove Islam before all. Outside the church, the scene was alive with murmurs and whispers. Members of the congregation spoke in eager tones, their excitement adding to the buzz. Meanwhile, a small group of Muslims gathered nearby, their faces a mix of tension and curiosity. Hamza stood among them, his eyes quietly scanning the scene. While the others exchanged worried glances, Hamza remained silent, his thoughts a whirlwind of questions and determination. Inside, Pastor William made his way to the pulpit. His robe billowed behind him, adding an almost theatrical air to his presence. With a voice that commanded attention, he addressed the congregation. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his words ringing with authority. "Today, we are not merely here to worship, but to confront the truth, and the truth must always be revealed." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers filling the hall. Pastor William raised a hand to quiet them, his voice steady and deliberate. "If there are any Muslims among us who believe their faith is the true path," he declared, "I challenge you to step forward and answer my questions. Let us see whose belief stands firm." The room fell silent, the weight of the challenge hanging in the air. The congregation looked around, waiting for someone to rise. Among the Muslims present, no one moved. Many bowed their heads, reluctant to meet the eyes of the preacher, their unease palpable. Outside, Hamza heard the pastor's words echo through the doors. His heart raced, but it wasn't fear he felt. It was resolved. Ignoring the gentle tug of someone's hand on his sleeve, he stepped forward. "Hamza, don't," someone whispered urgently. "This isn't your place." Hamza turned, his eyes shining with quiet determination. "Sometimes the place finds us," he replied softly. With steady steps, he entered the church. The chatter stopped as soon as he walked in. Heads turned, and a wave of silence swept through the crowd. Hamza's small frame stood out against the grandeur of the hall, but his presence seemed to grow with every step. He moved toward the front, where Pastor William stood waiting. The pastor eyed Hamza with surprise, then let out a dismissive chuckle. "A child?" he said, his voice laced with mockery. "Is this the defender of your faith? Is this all the Muslims of this town can offer?" Hamza stopped in the center of the room, facing the pastor with a calm and steady gaze. His voice, though soft, carried a quiet strength that commanded attention. "Pastor," he said, "I may be young, but truth isn't bound by age. You have questions, and I will answer them to the best of my ability." The room was so silent that the faintest whisper could have been heard. Even those who doubted Hamza's courage couldn't deny the strength in his words. Pastor William smirked, masking his surprise with sarcasm. "Very well, boy," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "If your God is truly one, as you claim, then why does he need angels and prophets to convey his will? Does that not show weakness?" The question hung in the air, and the congregation leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the boy standing at the center. Hamza's gaze didn't falter. The weight of the moment was immense, but so was his faith. This was his moment to speak, to stand, and to show that even the smallest voice could carry the greatest truth. Hamza stood firm, his calm demeanor radiating wisdom far beyond his years. As he prepared to answer, the weight of the pastor's question seemed to hang in the air, thick with tension and expectation. Hamza's eyes closed briefly, a silent prayer for guidance crossing his lips. When he opened them, his gaze was steady and confident, meeting the pastor's with an unwavering calmness that silenced even the faintest whispers in the room. "Pastor," Hamza began, his voice clear and deliberate, "suffering is not a sign of injustice, but a test and a reminder from Allah. Just as a teacher does not give exams out of cruelty, but to assess and prepare their students for greater challenges, Allah allows us to face trials to strengthen our faith, refine our character, and remind us of our purpose." The congregation leaned forward, captivated by the boy's clarity and conviction. Hamza's words seemed to pierce through preconceived notions, leaving no room for dismissal. The pain and hardships we witness, wars, hunger, and death, are not Allah's doing but the consequences of human actions. Greed, pride, and injustice often drive these tragedies. Allah, in His infinite wisdom, has provided us with guidance through His revelations, but it is up to us to heed His message and choose the path of righteousness. Hamza paused, allowing his words to settle into the hearts of his listeners. His tone softened, yet it carried the weight of truth that could not be ignored. Even the greatest prophets, including Jesus, peace be upon him, endured unimaginable trials. Were they not beloved by God? Their struggles were not punishments but lessons for humanity, teaching us the value of patience, perseverance, and unwavering trust in Allah's divine plan. The room was enveloped in profound silence. Every eye was fixed on Hamza, and every heart seemed to wrestle with the truth of his words. Even Pastor William, who moments ago had exuded confidence, now appeared visibly unsettled. His confident posture faltered, and he struggled to maintain his composure as the boy's message resonated deeply with the congregation. Hamza's voice, though soft, carried the weight of conviction as he delivered his closing words. Suffering is a reminder of our mortality and our need for Allah. It humbles us, unites us in compassion, and shows us that this world is temporary. What matters most is how we respond to these challenges, with faith, kindness, and trust in Allah's wisdom. As the final words echoed through the hall, the once lively church fell into an awe-filled stillness. Faces that had once brimmed with certainty now reflected a mix of contemplation and introspection. Pastor William, for the first time, was at a loss for words. Hamza's courage and faith had illuminated a truth that even the most seasoned rhetorician could not deny. It was more than a debate. It was a moment of transformation, a glimpse of divine wisdom through the heart of a boy. Hamza stood motionless for a moment, his eyes closed as if seeking guidance from within. His mind replayed the teachings of Imam Zadeh, a man whose wisdom had become a cornerstone of his life. Slowly, Hamza opened his eyes, and a serene confidence filled the space between him and Pastor William. "Pastor," he said, his voice steady yet filled with respect, "may I pose a question to you? Imagine a teacher giving their students a difficult test. Would you say that the teacher does not care about their students because the test is hard?" Pastor William frowned slightly, his face thoughtful. "No, I wouldn't say that. The teacher gives tests to challenge the students, to help them grow and prove their abilities." Hamza inclined his head with a gentle smile. "Exactly, Pastor. Allah is like that teacher. Trials and suffering are not signs of his neglect or injustice. They are tests to measure our faith, patience, and resilience. He has blessed us with intellect to think, strength to endure, and hearts to guide us through hardships. These trials refine us, preparing us for higher levels of understanding and spiritual growth, much like a teacher preparing their students for the next stage." The congregation sat in stunned silence, Hamza's words casting a spell over the room. The weight of his explanation touched something deep within. An elderly woman seated in the back row whispered with awe, "This young man speaks with a wisdom that reaches the soul. His words, they're so moving." Pastor William seemed lost for a moment, grappling with a response. His mind searched for an argument, but every thought felt like sand slipping through his fingers in the face of Hamza's calm reasoning. Breaking the silence, a man from the front row, a respected and devout member of the congregation, rose to his feet. His gaze was steady as he addressed Hamza. "Young man, your understanding is remarkable. Where does someone so young gain such profound knowledge? How can you speak with such conviction and clarity?" Hamza's expression softened, humility radiating from his demeanor. "What I share is not my own wisdom. It comes from the Quran, the word of Allah revealed through the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Quran is my guide. It is a light for anyone who seeks it sincerely, with an open heart." The atmosphere shifted, transforming from one of opposition to one of inquiry. Members of the congregation, who had come to support Pastor William, now leaned forward, their expressions filled with curiosity. Questions poured out about Islam, the Quran, and beliefs they had misunderstood. Hamza answered each one with patience and sincerity, his words free of arrogance or condescension. He spoke only with the intention of sharing the truth, his simple yet profound explanations resonating deeply. Pastor William finally broke his silence. His voice, once commanding, now carried an almost imperceptible tremor. "Young man," he began softly, as if speaking to himself as much as to Hamza, "for more than 20 years, I've stood at this pulpit, convinced of my path, my truth. But today, your words have unsettled me in ways I can't explain. You've made me question everything I thought I knew." Hamza lowered his gaze for a moment before meeting the pastor's eyes with humility. "The truth belongs to Allah alone. I am only a servant, sharing what I have learned." The church, once filled with tension, now felt like a space of reflection. Hamza's words had not only answered questions, but stirred something profound in the hearts of those present. His sincerity and unwavering faith had left an indelible mark, one that would linger long after he was gone. The church room was still, quieter than it had ever been. Every gaze was fixed on Pastor William, who now seemed a shadow of the confident, commanding figure that had spoken so fervently from the pulpit moments earlier. His shoulders sagged slightly, and his eyes betrayed the turmoil within, a man suddenly confronted with the weight of his own heart. "If what you say is true," Pastor William began, his voice now tinged with uncertainty, "then perhaps I have neglected something deeply important in my life." Hamza, the young boy who had stood his ground with surprising courage, looked at the pastor with an expression of pure compassion. His voice, steady yet gentle, carried wisdom far beyond his years. "The truth has always been there, Pastor," Hamza said. "Sometimes we just need to open our hearts to truly see it. If you seek it sincerely, I believe Allah will guide you to the right path." The room seemed to hold its breath as Hamza's words settled in the air, their weight palpable. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. Pastor William stood silent, his thoughts clearly racing. His once firm convictions now felt like sand slipping through his fingers. Meanwhile, the congregation sat frozen, their usual whispers of judgment replaced by a hushed reverence. The energy in the room had shifted entirely, from pride and self-assurance to humility and deep introspection. It was as if Hamza's words had sparked a light in a space that had long been shrouded in shadows. In that profound silence, something extraordinary was unfolding. Hamza, a boy from the market, had planted a seed of truth not just in Pastor William's heart, but in the hearts of everyone present. Though small, the seed carried the promise of transformation, and Hamza knew his journey had only just begun. By the following morning, the story of Hamza's bravery had swept through the city like wildfire. Those who hadn't been at the church now eagerly recounted how a young Muslim boy had stood before Pastor William and spoken with wisdom and grace. Word spread even beyond the city, and Hamza's name became the subject of conversations in distant towns. But the most unexpected turn came just days later. Pastor William requested a private meeting with Hamza and Imam Zadeh. The church, now devoid of its usual congregation, seemed almost serene as the three of them sat together in its quiet halls. Pastor William's voice, once booming with authority, now carried a humility that made Hamza's heart ache. "Hamza," the pastor began, "your words from the other day have been echoing in my mind. For so long I thought I understood God, but now I realize I've only been speaking of Him, not truly knowing Him. You've opened my eyes and I want to learn more about Islam. Will you help guide me?" Hamza's eyes glistened with tears, his heart swelling with emotion. He responded softly, "I am just a boy, Pastor, but I will do my best to help you." Beside him, Imam Zadeh smiled warmly and said, "When someone sincerely seeks the truth, Allah guides them to it. We will support you on this journey, Pastor. It may not always be easy, but the path to Allah is open to anyone who earnestly seeks it." What followed was a life-changing transformation for Pastor William. He immersed himself in studying the Quran, engaged in long and heartfelt discussions with Imam Zadeh, and reflected deeply on his past. With every step on this new path, Pastor William found himself enveloped in a peace he had never known, a peace that spoke to the truth he had long sought. The congregation, who had once supported Pastor William, began to show a growing interest in Islam. They approached Hamza and Imam Zadeh, eager to learn more about a religion they had only heard about in a negative way. Hamza, with patience and wisdom, answered their questions. Sometimes he used simple examples that made complicated ideas easy to understand. Then, one day, Pastor William stood before the church, but not to preach. His voice was filled with emotion as he said, "My dear brothers and sisters, for many years I thought I was guiding you on the right path. But a little boy has shown me a greater truth. After learning about Islam, I have found a peace I never knew before." The congregation was stunned. Some even wept, but there were no shouts or protests. Pastor William continued, "I've decided to embrace Islam, not because I want to leave you, but because I want you to see the truth I've found. If you wish to learn, let us do it together." That moment marked a turning point for the church. Many members of the congregation began exploring Islam, and eventually most followed Pastor William's example and embraced the faith. Hamza, who had been watching quietly in the corner, was humbled. He never imagined that his simple act of answering questions would lead to such a powerful change. Imam Zadeh placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Hamza, you've become an instrument of Allah's truth. Remember, this is not about you. It's about Allah guiding others through your heart." Hamza nodded, his eyes filled with tears of joy. He realized that his courage and intelligence were only small parts of Allah's bigger plan. Over time, the church transformed into a place for learning about Islam, where people from all walks of life gathered to explore the faith that had touched their hearts. The small town became a symbol of how truth can spread, even through a young boy with faith as strong as a mountain. Hamza, once just a simple market boy, became an inspiration, proving that truth doesn't depend on age, status, or strength. It only needs a sincere heart and unwavering faith to create change. This story is a timeless reminder that Allah chooses whom He wills to carry His light. Hamza shows us that even a child can be a source of great change as long as they believe in Him.